Okay, so we talked a little bit about the Reformation, which is where we left off, and now I want to kind of slide into the scientific revolution a little bit. This one will be short. The thing that the Protestant Reformation does that is a really big deal is it splits the Catholic Church up, and it serves to alter the concentration of power in the Western world. So it actually really does erode the the control, like the hold that the church has on Western Europe. And in this way, it actually paves the way for the scientific revolution and ultimately in the Enlightenment, but we'll talk about that later. So I'll transition to talk about the Copernican Revolution. Um, just sort of broadly, it shakes the foundation upon which like a bunch of our beliefs had rested up until that point. So it actually is this complete and total upheaval of understanding of our entire universe, right? So everything that people had believed for a really long time about the way the solar system looked and where the location of the Earth was, um, and those things sound like really petty, lame things to like believe in. Oh, it's just like I could change my mind about that and tomorrow would still be the same. It actually isn't like that because it totally changes the way that man thinks about himself and his relationship with the universe that he does inhabit. So instead of Earth being something special, that if you look in the Hebrew scriptures, well, of course, Earth is special because God made the people and He put the people here, and since we're made in His image, it's really special. Now Earth is just another planet, and lots of planets have the possibility of harboring life. The sun, it's just another star. So you can't just like take the new information, discard the old information, and say, well, people used to believe this silly stuff, and now we don't have to believe it anymore. The new information is so significant that it changes the way that people think, and it changes the way that people operate and function in the whole world. So the new information doesn't fit with the old information, and so we have to kind of change our perspective a lot. When we talk about the scientific revolution, what I'm talking about is the Copernican Revolution, um, and we'll later on talk about Darwin and the Darwinian Revolution. Even when we say Copernican Revolution, it's kind of a misnomer because Copernicus isn't even the one who posited the heliocentric model. Initially, he's not the first person to do this. This goes back, the idea that the Earth potentially revolved around the Sun was proposed as early as the 3rd century before the Common Era by a guy named Aristarchus. Um, Aristarchus' research didn't get the attention that Copernicus' research does, and actually Copernicus is reviving Aristarchus' research. Um, so that's something to keep in mind. The dominant astronomical model prior to the Copernican Revolution is actually, we commonly attribute it to Clausius Ptolemy, who kind of packaged a lot of the astronomical findings of the ancient Greeks, and he complements them with his own observations and theories. And he does agree with Aristotle that the Earth is at the center of the universe and it's encased by these crystal spheres. So the moon and the planets and all the stars are situated within like the outermost sphere. Here's a picture of what it allegedly looked like. I don't know if this is like the best depiction of it, but you've got the Earth kind of in the center, and then all of these little ellipses around it are the crystal spheres. Here's a different one that I think is even cuter because it's got these little like things blowing the spheres around. It's cute, but it doesn't really work. Even though the Ptolemaic model dominated throughout the Middle Ages, because Aristotelian and Ptolemaic views are really neatly aligned with Christian theology, right? Because, well, again, God made the people. Of course, He would put them at the special planet. Um, so some problems started to be recognized with the Ptolemaic model, and it's not that they were new. It's just that the problems became so problematic that we couldn't function with that model anymore. Things like, well, if there were really these crystal spheres, everything would have had to have been moving around the Earth at these really fast speeds that are physically impossible. Sometimes you look up at the sky and it looked like some planets were moving backwards. That's called retrograde motion. Anyway, you had all of these sort of problems. This total breakdown of the model eventually happens, and it all kind of comes to a boiling point with Copernicus in 1543. He publishes this little thing called On the Revolution of the Heavenly Spheres, and he just merely suggests that a lot of some of the problems associated with the Ptolemaic model would totally disappear, or at least become a lot more simpler if we instead posited that the Earth moved around the Sun in a circle. So he kind of like gets the ball rolling. The thing with Copernicus's hypothesis is that it's supported by mathematical calculations. He's wrong, because he assumes that the planetary orbits would be circular. They're actually elliptical. But he does construct this really mathematically elegant basis for astronomy. What we had before, the Ptolemaic system, it was clunky, it was inconsistent, it didn't make sense. So Copernicus didn't change much. He just said, hey, what if we imagined that instead of the Earth being at the center of the universe and everything orbiting around it, the Sun was at the center. Just a tiny detail. So Copernicus was otherwise pretty faithful to the Ptolemaic system. But what happens is people are starting to pick up on this research. Kepler was a student of Copernicus's, and he buys into the theory, and he's the one who posits elliptical motion. So he publishes his findings in 1609, and then after that we have Galileo, who is lucky enough to come around when the telescope is invented, and they've gotten to be pretty good at that point. So he points a telescope at the sky, and he sees things that just do not fit with Ptolemy's system. And this is actually just the final nail in the coffin for Ptolemy. What happens with Copernicus and everyone who came after him, who contributed to all of this, is that we have this different picture of the universe, right? Galileo and Copernicus articulate the concept of the universe that's totally subject to mathematical laws, and this is very contrary to Aristotle, when he imagines and posits and proves to be true that the Earth is in motion. Motion is the natural state of things. Galileo violates these ancient assumptions about the celestial bodies being perfect, right, when he sees things like sunspots. So all of this new information is just sort of being thrown at people. And it's not that Galileo or Copernicus or anyone was trying to disprove the references in the Bible to a stationary Earth, but what Galileo especially was trying to do was argue that what he calls the book of nature should be taken as an equally valid source of truth. So biblical references instead could be treated as metaphorical devices for the benefit of the common people. So this is kind of where we end up with the scientific revolution. After Copernicus and Galileo, we are in this sort of limbo where the old system doesn't make sense, the new system is very, very different, so we kind of have to adjust. And that's the context within which Descartes writes the Discourse on Method. So that's it for this one, and I'll talk about Descartes in the next one. So we can then kind of view the culmination of the Copernican Revolution as the ultimate transition from the ancient world into the modern era. So I think now you've gotten all the context you need from, Western Civ 1 stuff, and how did we get to this point where Descartes writes this book. So you're pretty well equipped to see the rest of the stuff that we'll talk about in the class.